intro, Gage.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Out of Our League. I'll be your host today, Gage. Joining me, we have Kumail. Wait, Kumail's down there for everybody watching. We have Phil down below. And then joining us, a very special guest of the day, Mike Bithell.
Yay.
Mike Bithell.
With weirdly laggy video. I'll flip that off.
Well, Mike's gone.
Oh, he's straight up just disconnected. That's man. That would have been like the perfect. That would have been the perfect like prank ever. It's like, oh guys, my video's lagging. Let me turn it off, and then you just bail and don't come back.
It totally crashed my Discord for a second. I was like, no.
Oh no.
But I'm back now. It's all good.
Mike Bithell, I just want to say you're pretty good.
That's very kind and slightly aggressive and terrifying. But I enjoyed it.
It's something that we do.
If we were at a conference, I would be running away from you right now.
Yeah. Every guest gets that Solid Snake treatment, and it's always fun. Yeah.
It's always just a fun little. There's two things that happen. We try and happen on every Out of Our League, and you'll get the last one later. But that's the first one we always like to do.
I like that. So the concept of your podcast is that the people you have on, you think you can't get. Is that the?
Yes.
Is that the
100%.
That's a bold setup for a podcast. I like that.
We know what we are.
I like that a lot. Oh, that's cool. It's also like very, very flattering to all your guests, which is a clever trick. And I like that.
Yeah.
That's smart.
Exactly. That was kind of the easy thing of it. That was the fact that we're all kind of funny community members. So it's like,
right?
How are we going to get guests? It's like, oh well, we already made content. They already know who some of us are. Let's just get some of them on, and that kind of just allowed us to branch out a bit more and actually make some content that we could put out for people to see.
Not only that, but it like helped us feel more confident at trying to reach out to people. It's like, whoa, maybe we can do this. Maybe we can get more people on here.
Well, I think the other thing is, like, Mike was just talking about Flattery there. Do you want to tell him what we were called before Simply Sassy?
Yes. Oh my God. Okay. So.
Oh no.
I didn't think this
was going to come up.
So, we all met probably late spring, beginning of summer, around like March, April, something like that. Playing games together, stuff like that. We didn't really have like a group name. It was just like, I don't know, Warzone Boys or something like that. Yeah. And so there was a time where you tweeted something like about a game announcement or some other thing, and I had seen something about it, so like I replied with, oh, it got officially announced today or whatever, here's a screenshot. And the screenshot that I took had a DM notification from Phil. So in your response, you said something like, oh, thank you, and tell Phil hi or something like that. And I'm like,
nice.
Oh, that's pretty funny. Sent that to the group. We all thought it was hilarious. And then I don't know how it came about, but I basically just said, you know what? I'm going to change the group name, and I typed it all in, and we became the Bithell Boys.
That's amazing.
For a little while, yeah.
Just totally
a lie. I love it.
It's not.
It's literally not
legitimately what happened, because Twitter DMs, you can just change the group name and photo on the fly.
We were looking for an official name for our group once we released our first bit of content, and we had like a poll list of names, and you had Simply Sassy, Moderately Funny, and then you had Bithell Boys as well.
Yeah.
That would have been a really, really interesting call with the lawyer.
Right?
That would have been amazing. Like, I would have gone the call. I wouldn't have instigated the call, but I would have received the call. And it would have been a weird moment. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, thank you.
Yeah, that was a fun moment.
Little did you know, when you said that message, you were sending it to someone that was a huge fan. So it meant a lot, even though it was just a random comment.
I guess we're talking about the Bithell Boys. I think the first question we should probably ask is, who is Mike Bithell? For people who don't know, because I think a lot of the people that watch Out of Our League will probably recognize you from kind of funny content like GDC, and you had a conversation with Colin. So yeah, who is Mike Bithell?
Who is Mike Bithell? I'm a game developer, so I've been around. How long have I been making games for? About 10 to 12 years, something like that. About 12 years, I think. And making games started in kind of a traditional kind of making like console games to play stuff and like Wii shovelware games, and then went to social games, as you do. Then went to social games. So like back in the day with like Facebook games, when that was the new hotness, very quickly realized I didn't want to be doing that. So went and started doing indie stuff. And then just since then, I guess that's probably where most people have heard of me from, is like Thomas Was Alone, John Wick Hex, the Circular games, and now the Solitaire Conspiracy, which came out. When did that come out? Like was it August or October? I think it was October.
October sounds right.
That sounds about right, doesn't it? It's been a long year. It's been a long year.
Like you said, you've been working on games for about 10 to 12 years. What made you want to get into games? Because like it's not the easiest thing in the world, is it, to make games?
No, well, I imagine it's similar to why did you guys set up this show, right? Like it's basically, I think there's when you're someone who likes a thing, I think it's very natural to kind of go, well, could I make this myself? Could I do this? Those guys don't seem all that much cleverer than me. Maybe I could have a go. I think that's I think it's something kind of funny does really well in terms of like making that look very open and very making it look easier than it is. I think a lot of the time. And that was definitely for me. It was like, I was playing a lot of these games. I was loving playing video games, and I think it was a series of conversations. Just realized that games were made by people. I think when I was a kid, I thought it was just computers, like it was just a thing that you couldn't really get access to. I was just at the tail end of where you could kind of code, people who were coding like in their bedrooms, so like getting code in magazines and like taking it home and putting it into the computer. But I was at the tail end, so all the magazines I had access to that I'd like find in like car boot sales or whatever would all be out of date. So I'd have to like translate this old code into new code, and that's kind of how I learned how to do a lot of this stuff was playing with that. Also, my dad worked as a programmer for several years, so I kind of learned stuff from him as well. I'm second generation programmer, which is weird. But yeah, and then just realized games were a way of kind of combining all of that stuff with kind of my more kind of graphic designery, arty sensibilities, and kind of putting all that together. So it's cool. It was kind of realization that people make games meant that I kind of went and did that. I think it's more. I think we have much more access to game makers now. Like you see a lot more people who make games. Like I think people are more likely to know the names of some people who make games and stuff like that. So that's cool. But back in the day, like maybe you'd heard of Shigeru Miyamoto or Hideo Kojima, but other than that, like you weren't aware of who those people were. So that was kind of a revelation for me. It was like kind of in my mid-teens, like, oh, people make this stuff. I could maybe be one of those people.
So you briefly said there, games, like you saw games, you enjoyed games, and you wanted to make your own games. Was there a particular inspiration for you, or was it just across the board, you just enjoyed everything?
I liked. Okay, I came to it quite late because ironically, my parents wouldn't let me have a games console as a kid because they thought I'd waste my time playing video games, which I'd bring up every Christmas, of course. But not unpaid. But yeah, no. So I didn't. So my first console was a Dreamcast, right? So I played a lot of like PC games, like playing shareware games on Apogee stuff on my PC. But like the first proper console I had was a Dreamcast. My sister had a Game Boy because she was in hospital when we were kids, and that was what she played in the hospital. So I had access to a Game Boy, but I had not really interacted with that much. So I came to games quite late, and I think the one that I really remember was Shenmue. I remember playing that as a kid, and my image of what games was based on kind of secondhand. Like my mates were all into Sonic the Hedgehog. I had no idea what that was or why. I weirdly ended up doing a lot of like, it wasn't Photoshop back then, it was something called Paint Shop Pro was the thing I had access to, where I'd like Paint Shop Pro Sonic into photos of friends, just because I knew they...
You're not the reason why I see Rule 34 stuff, is it?
Whoa. It's... Whoa. This is like an 11-year-old Mike. He was pure and sweet. But it was definitely, like as a kid, like definitely I was aware of like gaming culture, but hadn't really interacted with it. But yeah, Shenmue was that was the one that blew me away, and I realized like, oh, this is actually like I'm living this guy's life. And you look back at it now, and obviously like it's way less deep than a lot of GTA games or loads of stuff we know. Has my camera gone really out of sync for you guys as well?
Yes.
Looking at my preview, I look really laggy.
I just like to pretend that you're speaking so fast that the camera can't pick up, keep up with you.
I'm just going to close. I'm going to slowly, as we go through this call, I'm going to slowly close every single thing I have open on this computer. That might help. But yeah, so I think Shenmue, even though it looks very silly nowadays and kind of hasn't necessarily aged amazingly in lots of ways. That was the one where I was like, oh, you could actually like make stories in this and kind of talk about characters and let the player be a character. That was the good moment it all kind of clicked together for me. So yeah, I think that's probably Shenmue. And then Deus Ex, and the big one for me as well, was massively important, was Metal Gear Solid, which I've obviously ripped off many times. But I remember that one I had, because I didn't have a PlayStation, I played the Metal Gear Solid PC port, which was absolutely terrible. You could barely move in it because it was all keyboard controls. Like, it was just not a good game at all. But it was given to me by one of my dad's mates, and his only introduction to it. And I also was not an anime kid at all, so I had no knowledge of like Japanese culture or mecha or anything like that. I like Transformers, but like I didn't have any of that cultural framework. So it was given to me by my dad's mate, and the only thing he said to me was, "It's a game about a spy. And if you climb up and down a ladder a few times, there's this female character who takes her clothes off." And of course, as a 14-year-old heterosexual boy, I was like, that sounds like the best video game I've ever heard. So I played that, and then obviously played it and was like blown away by everything that he hadn't mentioned to me. And I think that was, and that just the alienness of that, and the fact that I didn't have that cultural framework. And I think, Hideo Kojima is probably the first like game director I actually kind of internalized the name of and like had expectations. I remember when Metal Gear Solid 2 coming out, that just blowing my mind, and me messing up like one of my GCSEs because I got stuck on the ending to MGS2 and was playing that the night before rather than doing like revision and sleeping. So yeah, I guess it's the Say again, sorry?
It worked out for you in the end.
It did, but that definitely didn't justify. It didn't justify being a lazy kid, you know. But yeah, and then Deus Ex I loved as well. Again, kind of the Shenmue thing of just like realizing like whole games can be more than what I think of them as.
I think it's interesting because you have like the trifecta of Shenmue, which has one of the most at that time like realized living worlds. Then you have Deus Ex, which has one of the most like in-depth kind of choice systems that you can kind of like create your own playthrough in. And then you have Metal Gear, which is like one of the greatest version, like examples of storytelling and whatnot within a video game. So that's like the trifecta of inspiration for sure.
I'm definitely, and there's a level of like self-selection, right, and choosing your own legend a little bit with that. Like maybe actually I was massively inspired by like much worse games. Like I was really into a lot of Star Trek first-person shooters. Like Elite Force was just like shit. It was amazing. And like so probably I was also inspired by a lot of like not the most important games of their decades, but like. Yeah, no, I think that kind of weird kind of access point I had of like PC gaming with console coming a bit later is, I think, kind of, I definitely see that in my work. I'm not a console kid, even though I predominantly now play games on a console because I associate my laptop or my computer with work. So therefore I go and sit on the sofa and we'll play a game on the console instead.
So talking about games that inspired you, you started development before you were an independent developer. You started development for Blitz Games.
That's right. It's my first job
as a junior designer. And so working there, did you gain a lot of the knowledge and things that you needed to kind of decide to branch off from there?
Yeah,
what was that experience like?
It was a weird one. Like, it was definitely formative in good and bad ways. Like, I definitely learned a lot in terms. It was a kind of an old video game studio that existed for, I think I've got a mug somewhere that's like 20 years of Blitz. So it existed that long when I worked there. It was founded by the Oliver twins, who made the Dizzy the Egg games, which you either know or you've never heard of. Like, there's no one in the no one has vaguely heard of those games. Like, you either love them or you've never heard of them.
Right.
And they kind of did that. So they were kind of indie development stars of the 80s who made enough money that like, and you can trace back a lot of British development to like, it was them, the Cody's guys, sorry, Codemasters, the Frontier, like a lot of those studios were started by those kind of British bedroom coders of the 80s. And yeah, so it was a lot of like knowledge that was there, which was really interesting. And the Olivers were very kind of open to like chatting to me, like as this kind of precocious kid who wanted to one day run a game studio. So it was nice to kind of chat to them. But there are also like, there were things there that weren't great. I remember like awful bosses and just kind of horrible, I never really had to put up with too much crunch, but there was definitely like more late nights than there should have been and stuff like that. So I think I learned a lot about what I wanted to do and a lot about what I didn't want to do, and it kind of acts as a framing device. But I think the other thing that was really useful from just kind of a learning perspective was we were a studio of, I think, about 200 people, and there was never any money and there was never any kind of time to do anything. So you learned how to make games quickly. I remember one of the first game I think that I was a level designer on was we had 9 months to make a game that was I think we had a team of about 10 to 12 people, 9 months, and the brief, the pitch, the thing that the money men had convinced the other money men that we could deliver in that time was Shadow of the Colossus meets God of War meets Prince of Persia: Sands of Time. And we massively failed to produce all 3 of those games, but like you learn you learn a lot in those kind of situations where you're just a junior level designer on a project like that, and you've got no time to make something and no money, and going through that loop a few times definitely was kind of a nice practice run for some of the challenges that I'd have like as an indie, because in indie obviously you're often limited by budget and time, and I think that's not having the luxury of working on big games with long time spans actually kind of helped a lot, and kind of I think taught me how to get things done, which is a skill that I think our team is kind of quite well respected for by our peers, for just we are prolific, we make a lot of games with a very small team, and that's part of those lessons that came in from Blitz. So that's the positive I think of that experience for me.
That's one of the coolest things about your kind of legacy so far in the indie development world, is how many games you have been able to produce in the time period that you've been doing it, self-publishing video games. I think that's pretty amazing.
Thank you. I mean, it's definitely a choice. Like, it's definitely something I think about, because I also look like what Lucas Pope's done. Like, only made 2 games, but they were only the best games you've ever played in your life, right? Like, and so there's definitely like a trade-off. Like, there's definitely like I look enviously at the developers who take 5 or 6 years on something. I think I'd get bored. I don't think it would suit me, and I think my team would definitely hate it. So I think we're making the right games for us to be making, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't jealous of like the folks who just take a very long time over making like these incredible games that to me I think are better than the stuff that I direct. So yeah, I think there's pros and cons of both, but hopefully we're showing one way of doing it.
You briefly mentioned crunch there, and I think you're one of the more outspoken people on crunch. And
I get a lot of trouble for that.
Well,
I should show you my DMs.
Usually do.
Oh no!
But how does Mike Bithell sort of balance his work and life, and how does he try to how's he trying to spread that amongst the industry? How's he trying to affect the industry?
So in terms of personally, like I've definitely like not done well at that. Like in appraising my career so far, I've definitely like messed up the work-life balance thing. I mean, Thomas Was Alone was a game I made while working for someone else, so by definition, Thomas Was Alone was made entirely in crunch periods, right? By definition, because I was working a full-time job at the same time, which is a horrible thing to realize. So yeah, and in terms of like me, definitely like, switching off has always been something I've really struggled with, because the problem I have is I love my job. Like, I absolutely love sitting and working on a coding problem. It's just like the most fun I can have. I prefer making games to playing them. And that's a tricky thing to work around. You have to kind of be quite strict with yourself. I've gotten better over the years, and I had that balance. And I now work kind of, most days I'll clock in at 10 and leave by like 7, and that seems to work quite nicely for me as kind of a middle ground. But it's definitely something that I'd be lying if I said I've not pulled some extra hours. My feeling on that and this is where it gets controversial, is it's massively hypocritical, but that's, I'm working towards something I own. Every hour I spend on my game is essentially an investment in something that I literally can cash out of. I can sell my company to EA and it'll close in 5 years and it'll be great.
That's a headline.
No, we've been critical enough of EA on this show, so you're good.
Or any publisher, right? Like, there's always the option to sell a company and stuff. So my point is, like,
can't wait to see what Vicarious Visions does next.
That'll be interesting. Anyway, let's not go into that. But like, so there's a hypocrisy there that sometimes my work-life balance isn't great, but I own this stuff. Where I really refuse and where I draw a line is employees shouldn't be doing that. If you're someone who's working a salary, you are by definition being paid for an amount of hours of work. You're doing a trade. You're basically selling your time to your employer, right? You're saying, I'm going to do this work and you're going to give me this much money an hour, and that's our arrangement. And in the games industry, unfortunately, that is often absolutely terrible. Like, I've worked in places where there's no overtime pay at all, or any kind of overtime structure. So you're just expected to keep working, which means that as you work late into the evening, you're not getting more hours of pay. You're just getting paid less for the work you're doing. Added to that, the fact that, all the data, all the analysis we've ever seen shows that, 9 to 5 exists for a reason. And it's not because employers are nice. It's because that's an efficient, that's how long you can work for without killing yourself and staying efficient and staying productive. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of the time crunch in games doesn't actually improve or make the game better. It actually leads to people missing stuff and problems happening in production. So I'm quite outspoken about that. So no one who works for me crunches. It's a meme on our team that if I see you on Slack past a certain time, you're going to get told off. To the extent that I know people now, because people will just leave. Obviously, they'll have Discord and Slack and that open on their computer, and I'll message them and I'll be like, Mike, I use my PC for things other than work. I'm still logged in, but I'm not working. I promise. So we try and set that standard, and I think we show that you can ship games by doing that. You can commit to not doing that to your staff, and you can sell games and make games and have a business. You don't need to have crunch. Often crunch is there just to make the producer feel a bit better that they can see people around them working. And in reality, that producer's failed by having too much work for their staff to do, or they've been forced by a producer above them. Somewhere along the line, someone has made a massive mistake. So I'm pretty outspoken on that, primarily because, before I owned a company, I was a worker, and I remember how crappy those situations were, so I want to do what I can. And I think as an industry, we need to move past doing that. We shouldn't be treating staff that way. So I try and bring it up as much as possible. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to do so here.
Definitely. That's great.
I just got this image of Mike being the Kool-Aid guy, just cracking into the wall, just oh yeah, stop working.
No more crunch.
But the thing is, where it gets really interesting, and this is where I think a lot of the arguments happen among devs, because I think outside of dev circles, among consumers, among players, and among the press, I think the conversation is very different. But among devs, the biggest because I chat to people about these views, and the biggest criticism you hear back from other people who actually do crunch is, well, I love working late. If I'm proud of what I'm doing, I want to put in the extra time. And that's a really interesting rebuke, because I also love doing it, right? I also love putting in extra time and stuff. So I get it. But at the same time, that person is probably a crap coder at 9 p.m. and their boss should be smart enough to not be putting them in the position of doing that. So I think it's one of those things where you can kind of disagree with all aspects of the argument, but all of them are pointing in the same direction. Ultimately, it's not a good thing for productivity, and it's probably not a good thing for a person and their health and their personal relationships and all that as well. So I tend to, I get a lot of DMs every time I tweet about that. It's okay.
Yeah. We'll try not to retweet you too much in that case.
Yes, so...
Oh no, it's cool. I feel especially with in the social media age, you don't get to necessarily speak on every controversial topic, but that's definitely one that I kind of want to be an outspoken person on.
So to stay in this realm of business, but to switch gears a little bit,
Buy low, sell high.
Perfect.
That's my tip. That's my tip.
That's what
for you. It has the loss of GDC and like events like that been kind of impactful on everything you've been trying to pitch and do in the gaming sphere lately?
It's interesting. That's one of those questions, and there's a lot of those kind of questions in game dev, where it's so impossible to divorce where you're at in your career and in your company's growth. It's kind of tough to answer. So the best example I can give of this is like, no, like we're doing our thing. We've had a couple of projects come out in the last couple of years. We've got future projects kind of lined up. But when I think about the people we're working with and the things we're doing, I'm thinking, I met her at that conference. I met him at GDC. That person's only working with us because they liked a thing that we showed them behind closed doors at E3. You know, and you've got kind of this mind map you're kind of working back of like, there was, you know, the community interaction definitely kind of led to the opportunities that we're currently kind of enjoying. And when you think about like, you know, people coming up, you know, those people are not getting access to those things. So am I feeling it now? No. Am I likely to in the future? Probably not, because I already have a lot of those relationships and a lot of that kind of business, and people know we're in business, which is 90% of the battle, right? It's just to be known, to be around and doing things. So we're probably fine, but I worry about those kind of middle tier people, the people who've made a game that's like really stood out this year or the last couple of years and would have been the kind of the toast of the circuit. So one of the funny things about like when you go to like GDC and E3 every year is there's always like the game that surprised everyone last year, and the team who made it are like at their first GDC. And it was the year when it was me with Thomas was alone. There was and a few other, I think it was one year Thomas was alone. I think Lucas's, I think Papers, Please came out that year as well. I might be wrong about that. A couple of other things. And we were the kind of the new people at GDC, and we got to meet everyone. That was amazing. I remember the year where it was then super hot a few years later. And now, because I'd been there a few years and I knew enough people, like they were coming up to me and being like, "Oh my goodness, you're a Thomas Was Alone guy," and we were chatting about like what they were going to be doing. And I think about like the last year or two, and I think, well, would this have been the year where the Among Us devs could have really kind of arrived in these kind of spaces and gotten really cool meetings with like, you know, the suits that run the industry, you know, that kind of stuff? What opportunities are they missing out on being able to kind of ride the wave they've had this year? So that sucks. But yeah, well, we've been fine. We're also fine because we've always been a work from home studio anyway. So like Bithell Games has existed now 8-ish years, and yeah, it's always been work from home. We never had an office. So in terms of our process, that's been fine. So honestly, like the only knock-ons to the company have been like, you know, people's health and people's kind of emotional reaction to what's going on in the world right now, which is not to be undermined and is obviously really important, but like, no, we've not had the many kind of specific frictions in the business side because of this, beyond just the kind of decaying mental health that we all have right now.
So do you think that Solitaire Conspiracy would have sold as well as it has outside of a pandemic, or would you say it's about the same? Or is that hard
I think
to
it's
tell?
honestly, I don't know. That's another good question. I don't know. It's definitely done well for us. It's definitely like outperformed some of our previous stuff. But like at the same time, that's the thing is I think tying anything to any one specific input, like because I think you can also look at Solitaire Conspiracy and say, well, actually that's kind of an underpopulated space. Like there are lots of Solitaire games, but like there's not been many kind of modern ones or ones that have like tapped into the kind of sci-fi aesthetic stuff that we're doing, or that have had FMV. Like it's kind of an impossible genre to kind of look at and go, oh, we would expect to sell this many units. And that was one of the interesting things going in, was we had no idea kind of how Solitaire Conspiracy would do. So I wouldn't tie it to one specific thing. I know that across the board, a lot of people are buying games right now. Like we're seeing a bit of a good jump for a few studios. That's definitely like a vibe I picked up from other developers. But like, that's probably temporary, right? Because there are going to be economic consequences of the last year, and probably that will lead to kind of a depression in the game space. Presumably, like we'll sell less copies next year, probably. But yeah, I don't know. It's a weird one. The interesting with Solitaire Conspiracy is it is completely reactive to the current situation. Like that was a game that was made effectively because we were all stuck, right? Like, and a lot of the choices in that game are about kind of, well, who do I know? Like literally, like, who do I know who can film good FMV right now? Who do I know with a good camera? You know, that kind of like those kind of like, because I can't set up a recording. What mates have I got that can do this? What mates have I got that I can call up and ask to do this aspect? So that was very kind of a sticking it all together. Similarly with earlier in the year, we did North Star Rising, which was like a little story podcast radio show. And again, it was literally, in most cases, a few parts that we kind of cast in traditional ways with agents and all that jazz. But a lot of the people in that are just like me calling up people and asking for favors. And just going, can you come and do? Can you put a blanket over your head and record yourself on a microphone, please, and stuff like that.
I actually have a tab open for North Star Rising, so I didn't forget to mention it today because it's really good and everyone should go check it out.
Came together nicely, and that was literally me in February, like being a statistics nerd. Actually, I think it was like late January, like when those first numbers were starting to come out of Wuhan. And as a stats nerd and as someone who had like some level of understanding of epidemiology, because I've had to research it for previous games and stuff, looking at those numbers and going, shit. Like this isn't just like bird flu. This isn't just like a news story that's like being elevated. Like and actually literally having that kind of horrible realization that we were all about to be stuck. And the conversation around North Star Rising was literally, okay, in about a month or two from now, people are going to need fun entertainment to look forward to. We haven't got time to make a game, but we want to make something that kind of can speak to that. What can we do? And we realized that if we just cut the game bit out of a game, we could make something quickly. That was, and that's where that came from.
Yeah, there was definitely some like feelings of like subsurface circular and quarantine circular, like not necessarily, you know, in like the general aesthetic of what it was, but like the idea of having like this story, but then cutting out the game part. I could totally see I could totally see North Star being kind of that subsurface circular type of game.
I think it would have been like, I think that may have been how that would have worked out under different circumstances. It was originally the original plan was to do Star Trek. I was just going to literally do like an off-brand like Star Trek Next Generation kind of style story, and I sat down trying to write it. And Star Trek Next Generation is the hardest thing to write because everyone likes each other. It's impossible. It's really hard. You've got no conflict. It's like the amount of respect I've gained from Star Trek by trying to write something that was a copy of Star Trek. That's why, and then North Star Rising basically becomes like a silly story about characters who are a bit rubbish because that's easier to write, basically. So yeah, that was an interesting process.
Do you, if you look past like Thomas Was Alone, I don't know if you can fit it like a sci-fi genre to Thomas Is Alone. But like most of the other stuff that you've done kind of fits in this sci-fi genre. Is that
well, Thomas Was Alone is it's definitely an aesthetic I like for sure. Thomas Was Alone is sci-fi. It's they're AIs, so there's like a meta narrative there. You should play again. There's like a little interesting meta narrative there about kind of essentially because the original kind of idea for that was what if Terminator but nice. That was that was my original thinking of that story because it's the emergence of an AI and what if in order for an AI to achieve sentience, it had to understand kindness and compassion and communication? What if that's the thing that we keep forgetting about AI, and if that's where the breakthrough would come from? And that's kind of what Thomas Was Alone is about, or well, for me it is. I think other people have different opinions.
I just thought it was about a box, yes. Honestly.
Yeah, no, I think to be honest, and that's the thing. That's why I try really hard never to like just openly say what I think something's about because it always sounds like pretentious hipster nonsense.
But the about a guy trying to get a loan on his house.
That's right. Thomas was a loan. Yeah, I like that. Thomas needed a loan. I've been there a few times. But yeah, no, I think sci-fi is a good aesthetic for me. I like sci-fi a lot. Like, definitely, it's what I enjoy watching and playing. Like, I'm definitely a big fan, and my interest in like fiction definitely came in from being a big Star Trek nerd as a kid. That's where I learned world building, just like obsessing over the Star Trek encyclopedia and trying, like, as a kid, just knowing everything about that world. And Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and a little bit of Discworld, so a little bit of fantasy, but like, yeah, no, science fiction's always been kind of the thing that works for me. And then just aesthetically, just I like I like the worlds you can create. I like rooting things in that space and that reality. So yeah, I think sci-fi is probably always going to be something, at least in terms of the games I write and direct. As we go on, we're starting to we've got a project in production right now with a studio that I'm not directing. So that's going to be someone else's kind of take on a lot of things. So there's and that's going to continue to happen. But I think in terms of what the things that literally are me leading, probably will always be sci-fi. It's a crutch I absolutely love.
If I can just follow up on that on two things. So the first one is, you just mentioned that you're working on something new. So that tweet you put out last week about writing the first line of code, is that for that thing you're working on, or is that for a personal project?
God, it is good journalism you're doing right now. You've caught me in a space there. So we have something else in production that I'm not directing. The new thing I'm working on is something that I will be directing. So awesome. There's two things kind of happening right now. Or 3 or 4 or 7, who knows? But yeah.
How on earth did John Wick Hex come about? And I know Gage has got some words to say about that, but
that was actually going to be one of my questions.
I don't know you in a personal capacity, but when I saw your name attached to that, I was like, oh shit, good for Mike, because I've seen you on podcasts and stuff like that. So how on earth did that come about to be? Because I was just like, whoa, that's big.
It was honestly, it was a weird one. The very kind of brief version. So I'm trying to think how to frame it. So ever since Volume. So Volume was a game we did straight after Thomas Was Alone. That kind of was 3D and showed that we didn't just do rectangle games. Yeah. From Volume onwards, but that was it. Volume, kind of to an extent, as a business, that was one of the reasons to make Volume, was to show no, we can do 3D, we can go bigger if we need to. And after that came out and was pretty well received, we started getting license holders kind of coming to us. And it's just kind of a thing that happens once you've got some kind of level of visibility and people know you can make consistent stuff. Those kind of conversations start to come your way. And we've had a fair few people come to us over the years. But the approach that we decided on really early, was that we would actively try to sabotage any licensed project that came our way. Meaning, we would actively pitch our dream version of something that we never thought they'd let us make. Because the idea was, at some point we may do a licensed project, but we never want to do a boring licensed project. We always want to do something that's true to the license, but that feels like something that no one would ever let us do. And the best story, and I will in decades from now be able to say what this was, but a really cool license, a really interesting world that I really wanted to make a game in. We pitched something for that with some very weird ideas of what we wanted to do with it. And the only response I got was an email saying LOL from the boss of the studio.
Wow. That's awesome.
And we were laughed out of the room. That was it.
Oh,
so that was our policy. But that was the system working, because we wanted to make sure we weren't making something boring. Right. And we just took that process on and on and on. So when John Wick kind of started to come around, they approached me and said, do you like John Wick? And I of course I like John Wick. Everyone likes John Wick.
What a question. Do you like John Wick? No, I hate it. What do you think? Of course.
but I've got to give credit to Ben, who was the producer on it, and Good Shepherd, the publisher. They specifically said to me, we are coming to you because we've had a lot of very boring pitches for a John Wick game. Which
probably
I think probably
shooters. Just say it's do a first person
shooter. I definitely, I cannot confirm that, but I also wouldn't rush to deny it. A lot of very boring John Wick ideas, and they didn't want to make that. They wanted something weird, so they came to us, because we have that reputation as being impossibly strange with the things we pitch people. And it was coincidence. We were already working on a very early stage, kind of thinking about doing something with strategy. And weirdly, one of our touchstones for that was we want to kind of do John Wicky combat as a strategy game. What would we do with that, and how would we do fight choreography in a strategy context? So when they came to us with John Wick, literally we just said to them well, here's the thing we're definitely going to make anyway. If you want to make it with us, we'd love to have access to all of these amazing brains who make John Wick. But if not, no hard feelings, and we'll go and make it anyway. We just won't call it John Wick. And then it turns out that was a good pitch. They kind of were like, well, these guys care about it. They like what they're doing. And then it just became a series of meetings with Hollywood people. And eventually it became clear that they weren't going to stop us. Because that's the weird thing with Hollywood. There's a really good, I'd recommend anyone who's like interested in how Hollywood feels as someone who's kind of approaching it from the outside to watch. I don't know if you guys have ever seen like Mr. Sunday Movies, you know, the YouTuber, there's the Australian YouTuber, Mr. Sunday Movies, who's, I adore him, his stuff.
I'm sure I've seen something at some point.
He did an interview with the Auntie Donna people who did.
There we
you've
go.
seen Auntie Donna,
Right?
So he did like a 40-minute interview with Auntie Donna about like how the Netflix show happened, because they've been doing YouTube stuff for years. And their description of Hollywood is perfect in that it's basically a series of meetings with like a week, with like 2 weeks or a month between each meeting, and no one ever saying no to you, but at some point either you give up or you just commit to trying. And that is how Hollywood works. No one ever says, no, you can't do that. They just stop returning your calls. So we were doing this John Wick thing, and we were making prototypes of it, building it, working out what we wanted to do aesthetically with it, what we wanted to do musically, kind of building a team. And at all times, I was assuming at some point, people would just tell us to go away. And it was literally the day before we announced it, I was still feeling that way. And I was like, they're going to pull the plug. They're not going to announce this tomorrow. And then we did announce it the next day. No one stopped us. And that day was the first moment I actually felt kind of secure, like, oh, we're actually going to make the John Wick game. That's interesting. And from there, like, obviously just kind of blew up, and it was very cool. But it's a weird experience working with Hollywood people, but it was very interesting. And we got just so much like access to all the people who make John Wick and are in John Wick and all that stuff. We just got to learn it. The fun thing about it was, yes, we would have made it without them, but the amount of cool stuff that's in that game because of the relationship, both in terms of like, I got to direct Ian McShane. That's an experience I'm never going to forget. I got to work with Lance Reddick, who I love. You know, I got to do all of this stuff. Just amazing actors. But also just like working with the choreographers. Troy sucks. I love Troy. Troy's someone I would probably have worked with anyway, though, right? At some point, like me and Troy had been trying to find a project for each. Me and Troy had been trying to find a project to work with each other on for a while. Austin as well. Like we'd been kind of the three of us had always been trying to figure out something. So we'd have done that eventually. But John Wick kind of opened the door specifically to kind of those actors, but also like the choreography, like getting to sit down with the fight choreographers on Wick and be like, okay, how do you put together a fight scene? And then working out how our systems would work to kind of be based on that. So it's all really true to how they put that stuff together. Sitting down with Chad and having him just like show me YouTube videos of ballistic models he liked. Like just crazy. Chad's the director of John Wick. And just like all of that kind of back and forth was just really like useful and led to something that was interesting. And that's kind of my biggest takeaway was, you know, if we do license stuff ever again, and because John Wick did well, we'll see if that ever happens again. But I think maybe there'd be interest. It's all about learning. That's the reason to do it now. That's the reason we'll do it. Is if we think that it would put us in the room with people we can learn from as a team, be it on story or art or whatever. Like just whatever Hollywood's good at, it's really good at telling stories and creating these worlds. And there's a lot of lessons that can be learned and are best learned by being there with them and figuring stuff out. So it was really interesting. And definitely I grew as a director, I think, through it. I think my team really grew through it. And we did, it's amazing what kind of they got done in the time we had with such a small team. So I'm super proud of that project. But you had some thoughts about the trophies.
I did.
I've heard.
So not necessarily just with John Wick. There's a couple trophies in that game that are very difficult because
you should just get good.
Yeah, pretty much.
You're probably right. When it comes to John Wick, like the only, not even issue, saying it's an issue is such like an overblown thing. The only thing that I wish was a bit I don't know, simpler or just not in video games, period, is RNG stuff. Anything chance based. I'm not a big fan of chance based things unless they are extremely like specific. Like, hey, if you're below 50% chance you're gonna shoot this guy, you're not gonna hit him. But I always hate when it's like you have a 95% chance you're gonna hit this guy and you miss, and I'm just like,
and then you don't.
or like even this morning I'm running through the Elysium Club, and I'm starting off this one mission. There's this guy like 10 feet in front of me. 90% chance I'm going to shoot him. Every time I start the mission, I shoot him. But there's always that one go where I miss, and I'm like, how? I'm playing as John. I'm playing as John fucking Wick, and he's 10 feet away, and I can't shoot this guy. So, but
yeah.
It's
I think that's fair. And honestly, like design-wise, that was one of the biggest debates we had internally. And it's a really interesting one because I think you're right on a lot of levels with it. It's definitely like it definitely was a tough bit of design to figure out because there's pros and cons to it. Like obviously if you make it that you hit every shot you take, then that removes a strategic element. You know that. But there's a really interesting thing with John Wick where he's very weak, but he is weak. Like he takes damage. There's almost like a film noir kind of vibe. You have to always feel like you're just on the edge of fucking up to have that kind of John Wick energy. And it was a really interesting challenge to kind of work out. And I agree with you, actually. I think if we were to do another one, I think we probably would kind of maybe not remove that altogether, but definitely kind of put it in like, bigger bounds.
And sure. I do definitely want to clarify. Like I do think it works. Like it's not like broken or anything. Like I think it works the way it should. It's a lot of fun. I am thoroughly enjoying it. But God, your trophies are just sometimes just awful.
You have like
a
story you were saying before we recorded. We need to talk about this because genuinely this is really interesting to me because I've honestly never been an achievement guy. I've never been a trophy guy. It's not stuff that like sets my heart on fire. It's not the stuff I'm excited about. If I'm being honest, like it's not the stuff I love as a gamer, except for Hitman 3, where I will get everything in that.
Nice.
But like it's not an area of focus for me. So this is something before we started recording, you said you actually had like historically you've often disliked the trophies in our games. So I want you to take 10 minutes and walk me through it because I'm really genuinely super interested in this. I think this is somewhere where we underperform, and I'm interested in what your thoughts are.
I'm no Greg Miller. I'm not going to be like, hey, go buy fucking 99-cent
That's
games
not a bad thing necessarily.
And get all these. Hey, he's a coward. He won't come on the show. So I just want to put that out there.
You should just get him to come on. He'll be fine.
I'm trying. Trust me, I'm trying. He's very busy. We are trying to get him on. He's very busy.
He replied like that one guy to Mike. LOL. Just cut it there.
Dude. So for me, I was never like huge into trophies. I remember back in the day, because famously PlayStation 3 didn't launch with them. Xbox had their achievements and PlayStation didn't have anything until roughly a year after or something like that. So once that finally came around, I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And, I play games, try to get trophies, but whatever, I didn't care that much until maybe a few years ago. And it's like, oh, now I'm spending more money, buying more games now that I'm an adult and I've got money of my own to spend, but I'm getting more into games that are massive. And I often find myself either like beelining the story or I'll do a bunch of stuff and I'll miss one or two things. And trophies kind of became that, started off just kind of being that guiding factor of like, oh, I never did this. Right, I can go do that.
And pointing you towards the content.
Yeah, letting you know that there's something.
Feel your way through the whole thing.
Yeah, letting you know there's something out there that I haven't done yet. And then it became just satisfaction every time that little bling pops up. I'm like, oh yeah, I got a trophy. And just kind of progressed until the point where now I do really like getting trophies. I try to 100% games that I'm really into, especially games I find to be challenging. Again, not like Greg Miller where I'm like, hey, I'm going to go play My Name is Mayo 7 times and get 7 platinums. To be fair, I did do it twice. It was a disappointment. I hate myself for it. But I find it fun being able to do like Bloodborne. When I got the platinum trophy in Bloodborne, I was like, this was satisfying because that game is not
That's
easy.
A badge of honor, right?
It's like that's there forever. Awesome. It doesn't mean daily squat, but it's fun. It's a nice kind of separate achievement outside of a 100% clear or whatever in the game. But the one thing I hate Well, there's a couple things I hate about trophies. One thing is online stuff. I hate online trophies that are tied to your primary list. I like oh god, what was it? There was something more recently
like a separate list as well. Like
yeah, there was something more recently that came out and had like, here's all your single player trophies, but then all the extra stuff was in a separate trophy list, so you could still achieve your platinum trophy without having to do whatever. Because like games like Mercenaries 2, love that game. EA killed it. You know, Pandemic is gone. That game never got updated. There's trophies on there I can never unlock because you have to be like single player stuff, like earn $1 million just being connected to EA servers. It's like, this is a single player trophy, but if I'm not connected, I don't get it. Things like that always bother me. And then it's the tedious things. It's the like, God,
that's where we excel.
So
that's where we excel.
I'm going to exit. But thanks so much, Mike, for coming on.
Oh yes,
Camille
does have to
we'll
bounce.
get you again in the future.
Oh god, I gotta change the layout. Okay,
Sorry.
thank you for joining us, Camille.
Cheers, man.
Bye bye.
See you, man.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
man.
Oh god, that layout is broken. Anyway, I'm gonna keep talking. So aside from volume, A Witcher 3 is another good example of a game where it's like, here's something it wants you to do. It's like, oh, you need to kill an enemy with, you know, shoot them in the face and then stab them in the back to get this trophy, but it's like, do that 10 different times. Or you have to use this one spell, then kick a guy off a building, do this 7 times. And it's like, why? And then of course you have volume, which is like, hey, die 300 times, or, you know, things like that. And I'm like, well, if I'm good at the game, I'm probably not going to die too much. So that means there's going to come a point where I have to just grind,
sacrifice yourself
I'm not
over
actually,
and over again. Yeah,
like at that point you're not even playing the game technically. Another thing, like Fallout 4 is a good example of this. They have the Benevolent Leader trophy, which requires you to reach 100% settlement happiness. The thing is, settlements, once you hit like 97%, don't do anything. So you have to do all this stuff where, oh, build all these structures, put all the character beds nearby, and then you just have to let it sit. It's like, well, I'm not playing the game at this point. I'm just doing something tedious to unlock a trophy that I need to get the platinum or whatever.
That's valid. That's valid. I think for me, I think one of the things definitely historically, like, so the die loads of times one in volume, I agree, is horrible. It's primarily there because it was there and Thomas was alone, and I was saying before we recorded, like, Thomas was alone. It was much easier to get because you could die on a loop, and it was easier to do. I think for me, and it's an interesting thing about the difference between how folks like yourself who really try and build their trophy list think about it, and how people like me think. So for me, I think that's a funny joke. If I'm playing really badly at a game, I love it when I get a "you've died 1 million times" achievement, because in other people's games, like, I find that really funny because I'm like, screw you, like, I'm really trying here. But that's kind of funny. And that gives me a little giggle, a little moment. But I can totally understand, like, what you're saying of kind of like, if it's a list you're trying to fill in, then yeah, I've just given you a job, and that's not fun. So I think it's a fair point. I think I like the idea, and I do like that Sony do this now, and I'd like to see this kind of across the board. The idea of these kind of secondary lists, I think that's a fun place to mess around with these.
Yeah.
To say here's because no one who's working towards a platinum wants the silly achievement, really, or the grindy achievement, as you say.
Yeah, unless they're like super simple or something.
Right, but that's not like that wouldn't be their focus.
Right.
Whereas with I'm just going to try and get my camera back in sync for you. Let me just.
It seems to keep doing it on itself. Like, it keeps resyncing itself like every 5 minutes.
I'm not a huge trophy hunter, so I have no real like horse in this fight or in this race. There we go. That's the right one.
Well, that's it. Like, there's probably what's nice about the primary and secondary thing is that it does allow you to be you. Like, it gives you those 2 different ways of playing the game, which I like, and doesn't harm one player to amuse another. So I think that's probably kind of where we're going. I love the approach in Hitman 3, where that feels the way that game integrates, just in terms of its internal kind of challenge structure and how they do that. I love that. I'm engaged with that to a level that I've never been engaged with, like, traditional trophies or achievements on Xbox. And I think that's the way to go, and I think that's definitely something we're talking about more kind of going forward. it's an interesting thing. It's a weird one because it's something that as a developer you have to put in your game. For a lot of the platforms, like it's not like an optional thing. You can't opt out of it. And players wouldn't be very grateful if you did opt out of it either, you know. So it's an interesting kind of forced mechanic that I think in the past maybe we've not given enough thought to. So I really appreciate the notes. Like I think that is informative. So thanks for that.
Definitely.
Just for taking the time to tell me off. I mean,
I could honestly go on more about like if I had like a couple hours, I could probably go on like what to do and what not to do because I've had a lot of experience with this because I've been playing games for a long time and trying to collect trophies, and there are so many examples of here's a perfect trophy list and here's like, you know, Metal Gear Solid 4 where it's like you have to beat the game once without an alert and then you have to do it again the same way, and it's like, you know what, Kojima, you beat me, fine, I'm done. Yeah, things like that.
You know what, you're giving me, I'm just going to switch to my slightly worse camera that should probably have better. There you go. That's going to be better. Well, you're giving me an interesting idea in terms of like a research task here as well. Like I would love to go to like one of our playtesting partners and like get some surveys done. Like I want to know what percentage of people are in both camps, how they're impacted by the other ones. Because we asked this question. I asked this question on Twitter the other day because we're adding content to Solitaire Conspiracy kind of and have been for a while and will continue. And one of the things we've been asked is like whether we can tie new achievements to some of that new content. And Steam's not got anywhere near the kind of depth of the trophy system on PlayStation, so it's kind of basically just a list you're adding to. And so I asked the question, like, would you be annoyed if there were new achievements added to, to Solitaire Conspiracy, and it will take away your 100%, but it'll give you an opportunity to see new content. And 80% of people didn't care, 10% of people loved it, and 10% of people hated it. And that's a really interesting thing as a game designer, where you look at that and you go, do I want to please that 10% more than I want to annoy that 10%? Like, and ultimately, I made the choice of not pissing off the 10% who would hate it. But like, these are the interesting conversations, and I like I said, I like Sony's approach to it, saying that does fix a lot of these issues, kind of going forward. So yeah, no, thank you for your thoughts.
Of course. Now also let me tell you about how much I hate. No, I'm kidding.
do it. It's like let's post-mortem the entire.
Thomas Was Alone doesn't have a platinum trophy. What the hell, Mike?
I wanted one. We couldn't get one. That's the honest answer with that one.
That was back in the day when that was still very difficult to like.
Back in the day, that was something you really couldn't get, and Sony. I've got to, Sony have been very supportive to us over the years. But like, Thomas Was Alone, like, was our first game. We were unproven. They were very protective of platinums back then, which is utterly fair enough. They were not the worst partners when I was first starting out, so it's all good. But like, yeah, no, I'd love to see Thomas Was Alone get a platinum. I don't know how that process would work now, if we could retroactively go and do that, for lots of technical reasons as well as the platform.
Theoretically,
but yeah,
should be able to. Maybe.
Speaking of Thomas Was Alone, and you mentioning that I need to play it again, which is true.
I'll bring it up with Shu next time I see him. I'll tell him off. I'll be like, you got to put a platinum on Thomas Was Alone.
There you go. Kumail, before he obviously had to go, but he had one question of when is it coming to the Switch? The Nintendo
Thomas
Switch.
Was Alone?
Yeah.
We've announced it. We announced it's coming. I think we did that. Did we do that?
I hope so.
I think we did. If not, exclusive.
We got a scoop.
I think I put up a video. I think I put a video of it up a couple of months ago with the dev build. It's lovely. I love the port they've done. It's Ant Workshop who've done the Switch ports of Subsurface Circular and Quarantine Circular for us, and just really professional, really great, high quality with the controls and with the vibration, everything. Just lovely Switch ports.
Nice.
So they're working on it, and I think there'll be some news about release date soon with that.
Okay.
But yeah, it's been one of those ones we wanted to for a while. Yeah, there is a release date. We've just not announced it yet. But we will at some point in the future, soon, hopefully. But yeah, no, Switch definitely was like, that's past.
Just announce it, Mike.
Just announce it right now.
Just announce it.
Hold off.
Because right now it just says
would be on the roof out there.
Because right now it just says Q1 2021. So I think he was digging for like a more in-depth date if you had something.
He wants to get us our next big.
It's coming.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's not been cancelled or delayed. I'll put it that way. It's not been cancelled or delayed. It's on its way. It's on its way.
we've been trying so hard to get like one big break. Like, so like nobody knows this because nobody watches our stuff, but we leaked that Miles Morales was coming to PS4 and Spider-Man was being remastered, all because I got into some stupid argument with like animator from Insomniac on Twitter. I said something.
And they let it slip.
Yeah, they kind of let it slip. Where it was about Crunch. I think it was back either Naughty Dog or maybe it was CD Projekt Red, and we were talking about that or whatever, and he was going off like, "Oh, you have no idea how hard it is to start developing a game on PS4 and then move it to PS5." And I'm like, I can see in your profile you're working on Miles. Are you doing this? Yeah. And he's like, no.
Yeah, it was like
definitely great.
Speaking as a worker in the games industry, please do me the favor of forgetting who it was that accidentally leaked that to you, because that guy could get in a lot of trouble. Don't ever like point out who that was, because that guy probably got away with that.
I'll never say his name. It would be
bad for him.
I never showed the tweets or anything, but he was just someone who worked there.
That's the right way to do it.
He seemed like a nice guy. It was just, sure. I was like, oh, somebody from Insomniac talked about this, so yeah, I would never go out of my way to like shit on somebody. Like, it's a terrible way to get into the industry. It's like, hey, I want to work in this industry, but by the way, I'm the one who got so and so fired because I don't know, out of hubris or whatever. I'm like, hey,
I mean, it's weird. I've been in the room when that's like, I remember one Friday night down the pub when just sat with friends, and one of the friends had put. It was, I'm not going to say what game it was, but they put up like some concept art in their portfolio, and it had the logo of the game, and the game hadn't been announced yet. So they accidentally leaked it, and it was going around all the games websites. And we were sat in the pub, and it was the weirdest thing because like we were all drinking, and then this guy just like this ashen face appears on his face, and because the pub was near the studio where this guy worked, the bosses started coming into the pub. And they were like, a couple of guys came in and like, what are you doing? And took him to a side. It was just a horrible evening. It was fine. He didn't lose his job because, you know, they were a good company he was working at, but like, these mistakes are awful. And it's terrifying. I spent a year and a half working on John Wick, and just in constant fear that I would accidentally say the words John Wick in an interview, because it was one of those things where, do you know what I mean? Like it was like a word that was on the tip of my tongue at all times, because I would say the word. Obviously, I would say the phrase John Wick 100 times a day. But you know, when I was on a podcast like this or whatever, I'm doing everything in my power not to say that word, because if I said that word, you'd be like, "That's weird." But Mike Bithell just said John Wick. What's that about? And it would be a thing. I know. So this and definitely in a similar boat now, where like there are things we're doing and talking about where I'm trying so hard at all times not to accidentally leak. And I'm going to continue to work hard and not do so. So unfortunately, sorry, you're not going to get the scoop out of me on this one.
No.
I think we need to wrap this up. So I wanted to get to some community questions.
Go for it.
One of them being from Riley O'Neill. Ron Each 96 on Twitter. Why you so cool, Mike?
Why am I so cool? I don't know. I don't think I am. So I'm gonna spin this off as a way of avoiding the actual question you're asking. I think generally, most gamers would love most people who make games, because most people who make games are, you know, people who make games are interested in games. Like you'd have a lot in common with most of the people whose work you like, I think. So I think, honestly, often I look at, you know, the people who are thought of as very cool or have nice, you know, a nice reputation online, and they're just the ones who are talking. And actually, the 10 people who don't spout their nonsense on social media, you probably like them as well, you know. So I think it's very nice of that person to think I'm cool, but like I'm boringly standard. Like I'm boringly kind of normal levels of cool for people who work in the games industry.
I think a lot of it comes from the fact that, you know, you've done a lot of great work at, you know, building a company and building them into a place where you can publish a game and, you know, comes out and it's great. And I think that's probably something of where they're coming from.
Well, then in that case, as much about me, they're talking about my team as well, which is lovely. Yeah. Like it's something that it's called Bithell Games, which is something I've never been happy with, but it was something we had to do from like a marketing point of view early on, and one day I'll change it. But like there's a team, and I think it's very easy to kind of, and we all do this, right? Like I mentioned Hideo Kojima earlier, but there was hundreds of people who made those games. Like, and I think there's always a risk of the kind of this auteur nonsense kind of creeping in. And like, so yeah, if it's about the games and it's about the company, then yeah, there's lots of other people. That's why we put like intro sequences with everyone's names on and stuff like that. Like we want to make sure people realize that it's not just me. I'm just a useful idiot to put in front of cameras and on social media to try and sell our stuff.
Well, it works. People buy your stuff, so
they seem to be, which is lovely.
Nuno Marx asks, what was the process of coming up with the idea for Solitaire Conspiracy like? What was it like? And then where did the match between Neon Futuristic and the guy from Uncle come from?
So weirdly, you know what's funny about that was literally the man from Uncle, the recent, was it Guy Ritchie did the new Man from Uncle with like,
that sounds right.
I think it was with Superman and Armie Hammer. So I'd watched that, I think, like literally watched that while in pre-production on Solitaire Conspiracy, because so the answer is Solitaire Conspiracy happened for a couple of reasons. One was we'd been pottering around, we'd been interacting. We helped out with Ancient Enemy, which was a great solitaire game made by a mate of ours called Jake Burkett, who's brilliant. So I'd been close to some solitaire stuff. I was interested in it. I was also really interested in doing a card game that felt nice, because I felt like a lot of card games don't have really good feel, like just in terms of how satisfying it is to click on something, how satisfying it is to interact with that world. So I wanted, like, as a designer, I just wanted to kind of really get into like the microsecond click speeds of card picking up and dragging. Like I just wanted to make that feel good. So that was kind of academically interesting to me. And then in terms of theming, because we knew we would, that Solitaire Conspiracy was 4 months and kind of 3 core team members, me, the artist, and the composer, kind of working on that every day for 4 months. So it was a very quick turnaround. And we knew that we were making it basically like to come out during a horrible crisis in the world. And the spy thing comes, and the kind of the spy and the kind of techie spy futurist thing comes from, I wanted to make something comforting and relaxing. But for me, if I'm pissed off, the best thing I can do is put on a Mission Impossible or a Marvel movie. Those films for me, for whatever reason, they're my relaxation films. Like I could watch Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol every day for a year and be fine. If that was just the only film I could watch, I would still be happy. The Brad Bird one, where it's all like Looney Tunes logic, it's brilliant. He climbs on a building. So that kind of comfort food was stuff I was thinking about. So the kind of doing a spy story just felt like a fun twist. And then the cyberpunky stuff came in just because I'm obsessed with sci-fi kind of tropes. There was always going to have to be robots in it. That's always going to be a part of what we do. So it's just kind of a coming together of those interests. I also really wanted to work with John Everest, who is a composer who'd done BattleTech, and what else has he done? I always get it mixed up. Is it Shadow Hand? Not Shadow Hand. The Elves in the Future. I can't remember. I'm embarrassed. I can't remember his other. I can't remember. Anyway, he'd done a lot of cyberpunky techie stuff. What am I thinking of? It's not Shadow Hand, because that's one of Jake's games. I'm going to look this up as we're
talking. Now, okay, I know what you're talking about now, and no, man. I'm
thinking of Shadowrun.
Right?
Shadowrun.
Yes, Shadowrun.
So he'd done a lot of Shadowrun, and he'd done some Shadowrun stuff. He'd done the recent BattleTech game with Paradox. So I'd wanted to work with John Everest for a while, so I knew he was kind of good at that kind of techie, cyberpunk, futuristic stuff. And Jen, who was the artist, like I'd seen a lot. I love her work, but I'd only ever seen her kind of doing fantasy stuff, and I felt like if I let her kind of for work do like robots and sci-fi, she could do really interesting stuff. So it was a really nice kind of pairing to those two people I'd wanted to work with for a little while. So it just kind of came together like that. Often these things are not like just kind of Moses coming down from the mountain with like, here's the next game we're going to make. Most of the time they're problem solving. Most of the time, and I think this is true of most indies, and just it's a different scale, I guess, that we're playing at just because we have a bit more budget. But like, it's problem solving. It's looking around you and going, okay, who's around? You know, who can we work with? You know, Subsurface Circular happened because we basically got something cancelled. We were starting on a big project. We started to hire people in, and then it died. And I looked around and I had an artist, you know, a couple of really good artists, animator, composer, various people like that, and no one else. And it's like, what can we make? What's a game we can make where it's just art, basically, and a bit of code? I can write. We'll do a text adventure. And it's like those kind of problem solving of kind of like figuring out like what you can get done at that time. And what was interesting is then we finished Subsurface Circular and the John Wick conversation had started, but was, you know, as you'd imagine, lots of contract negotiation and kind of stuff like that. So that's why we made Quarantine Circular, because basically the team was stuck for 6 months without anything to do. And I was like, well, we just made one of those and we know we can make that and people seem to like it, so we'll make another one of them. So there's always this kind of problem solving element of like trying to work out who on the team can do what and how do we fit all of that together. That's one of the most interesting parts, because that's how you end up with interesting projects. I think people tend to think of, and this is where the auteur thing can be tricky again, is people tend to think that like the genius comes out of their office and says, this is the next game we should make, here's my idea, and this is all the things we need to do, go and get me some money and people so we can make this. But usually actually it's more reactive than that. It's usually more the people and the budgets and the time, and then, okay, what interesting thing can we make, and how are we going to make that interesting enough to us that it's good for players? Because if you don't care, the audience isn't going to. So you have to kind of find the things about it that you're going to find interesting. So that was, that's where Solitaire Conspiracy came from. Sorry, it was a very long answer to your question, which incorporated like 3 other games.
That was fantastic. Perfect. So speaking on problem solving, and you mentioned earlier that you kind of, when you were making Solitaire Conspiracy, you were kind of seeing who could make good FMV. For the kind of funny community, how did Greg Miller come about?
I asked him. I think that was basically it. Like, I got it into my head. So I was thinking about this. I was thinking about like spies and espionage, and I started having some conversations with like agents and things, and trying to figure out, like, because I knew I wanted to have like you talking to, you know, someone who could be your entry point into this espionage world. And every kind of person that I was thinking about, every actor that like I was talking to their agent about, they were all kind of boring. It wasn't a fun person to hang out with, and because it was Solitaire, because it was something that was meant to be quite broad, I knew I wanted like someone you'd like to hang out with. And I can't remember why. I think I just saw like a tweet from him probably, or like or kind of funny video came up in my YouTube feed. I was like, oh, I like hanging out with Greg. That's a fun time. Like, and like in terms of his persona on camera as well, which by the way is exactly who he is as a person, which is why it all works. But like he's someone who I know an audience, you know, the kind of funny community likes hanging out with Greg. That's part of what works about kind of funny. And of course everyone else on their shows. But like there's an energy there that it's a good time to hang out with Greg. And I thought that would be really interesting. I knew he had some acting jobs. I felt like I'd seen him do enough kind of press events for publishers and stuff that I knew he could sell it. I knew he could sell kind of certain story beats and kind of cool characters and bring you into this world and be your entry point. And then of course, there's the technical thing as well. Like I knew he could shoot good video of himself. Like I knew that was also something, or that Kevin could shoot good video of him. And I was like, that's a way in as well that makes sense. And you know, this is the lovely thing about this job, is that you do find opportunities to work with your friends. Basically, you go, okay, you know, this is the thing, and I try not to, like, you know, not pressure people, but just go up to people and go, like, here's a thing we're doing. I think he'd be a good fit. I knew Greg wanted to do voice acting and performance stuff, so I knew it'd be interesting to him. Went to him with the pitch of like, this is what I think this could be. And then we just kind of figure out the schedule from there and kind of work out how to make it happen. But yeah, no, I've been very lucky in that, like, I do at any one given moment, I've got like 5 or 6 mates where I'm like, I want to put you in something or work with you on something at some point. And you're always trying to find those opportunities where something makes sense for everyone. Or it'll be fun, you know, or just like, you know, something like with, say, Troy, for example, it's just getting him to do, just having him come in and do, I think he did one voice, he did like 2 lines of dialogue in an early episode of North Star Rising for this like generic thug that was meant to be a generic thug. And we recorded it one morning for him in like half an hour of recording, and it was so much fun what he was doing that I then went and wrote an episode that was just about my character, so that we could get him to do more stuff. So it's like you find those nice angles, and like I said, I think when people care about what they're doing and enjoy what they're doing and are working with friends, I think that can often lead to really, really good outcomes. So yeah, so Greg made a lot of sense, and he was an absolute delight. And I really like his performance. I think he's really good at it.
Yeah, he was a lot of fun.
I want him in a Marvel movie. I want to see him as a character in a Marvel movie. I think he's fun.
Just imagine.
He's a lot of fun. So yeah.
That leads us into the question that we ask every guest that knows Kind of Funny or Greg Miller, and that is, knowing Greg Miller, you know that he is one of the busiest people in the industry. You know he's everywhere. He's liking posts on Instagram. He's replying to DMs. He's replying to Twitter threads. He's making his own Twitter threads. He's making 30 internet.
All over the place, yeah.
Do you think he is a clone, a robot? Do you think there's like multiple Greg Millers? Do you think he's like a demon from another world? What's your opinion on Greg Miller as a person and who he is, what he is, and how he's able to do these things?
All I'm saying is when you watch when I was editing the footage, I noticed sometimes that that he was animating even when the video was paused. There's something ethereal. I don't want to say demonic because you don't like to cast aspersions, but there's an energy and a danger to him that definitely elevates his performances in games. But like, I do worry there's something going on there. So there's a presence. Let's call it what it is, witchcraft.
Maybe your next game should be Greg was alone.
Yes, like he's exploring the true story of Greg's seething demonic evil. Yeah.
Oh my God, what a way to end the show, man.
What's your most common answer to that question, by the way? What's your most common? What is people's theory?
It varies.
It's always fun every single time. That's why we do it. We've had, like the demon thing came from somebody. The clone thing came from somebody. I think Ben Please Be Excited was the one who kind of came up with like maybe he's a robot. But it's all over the place. It's just a fun question. Obviously, from the Kind of Funny crew, we got more down to earth, realistic answers of his kind of personality and his personal life. And
I'll tell you one thing. I'll tell you one fact about Greg that I don't think is common knowledge: that he has an incredible memory. Like a terrifyingly good memory.
That's pretty common knowledge when he busts out in like commercial tunes from 1987. That it's like, how do you know this thing?
Still holds it against me. Apparently, one year at E3, I absolutely blanked him at a party before I met him, and he was like trying to say hello to me, and I was like ignoring him, and it really bothered him. And he still brings that up to me now. Like, you blanked me the first time I tried to approach you. You didn't care. You're like, I don't care about that Greg Miller guy. I'm too big for him. And I genuinely have no memory of this. But apparently, the thing is, what's hilarious is I remember the party he's talking about. I remember where it was and who was there. I don't remember him at all, and that's amazing to me. But like, we were in the same room, but I apparently I was very rude to him. So I will always.
Oh, I will
always feel bad about that.
That's hilarious. Oh my God.
But so from the Kind of Funny crew, we got more kind of, it's Greg Miller is one of those people that he's the same person off and off camera, but he has like a different energy when he's on camera. But for the most part, like he is that compassionate, amazing guy who they don't really understand how he's able to do all the things and compartmentalize all the different stresses that entails. They don't know how he does it.
It's magic.
I think honestly, like honesty, and there's just to bring it to a broader maybe lesson of that though is it's much easier to be honest and to be kind of representing yourself honestly than it is to not. So if you're like that authenticity, I think authenticity often can be, it's kind of gross when we talk about it. Like it feels like, you know, like thanks to kind of, I guess, like YouTube culture and stuff, like we can feel like it's authenticity is almost inauthentic in a weird way. But like I think living your life with honesty and being a person of your word and being someone who is reliably yourself it's a shorthand, makes it a lot easier to kind of get along with people and also get things done because everyone knows who you are. I think honesty is the best policy. There you go. There's the lesson. That sounds very preachy, less preachy in my head than it came out.
Yeah,
I think it's a great place to stop.
That is fantastic. That's fantastic.
I killed it. I killed the show. This was the last episode.
You'd be surprised. Oh my god, we've had so many moments on shows that it's like, well, it was fun while it lasted. Just comments being taken out of context, like in a fun way. Always like we're joking around, but if somebody were to clip that out, it's like that sounds really like bad if you just take.
Welcome to the life of a politician or game developer.
A lot of that is because of Nick Scarpino. It's all Nick Scarpino.
Yeah, well, that's Nick's vibe. In fairness, that's Nick's vibe. Yeah, but we have that on Playwatch Listen as well. Like, there's definitely like been times where often where we've cut something where it's like that would be the story the next day because it's happened. There's been a few things slip through. What did I say? I said something that was taken as like having like revealed something about the PS5. I had no idea. I was just basically like making a guess at something that I thought was logical, and that was taken out of context. And like next day, like emailing Sony, like I didn't know this. I'm sorry. Like I clearly got this right, but like sorry. So yeah, you are aware, I guess, of the people will take stuff. Like we've had, I think Playwatch Listens spawned about 3 or 4 IGN headlines already. Like there's definitely like stuff we've accidentally let slip. So.
Speaking of Playwatch Listen, I know technically we're supposed to end it like 10 minutes ago, but we can't keep going on.
That's all good.
Do you guys like is Playwatch Listen something you guys are still planning on kind of keeping going, especially once like vaccines start rolling out, people start going back to work and stuff? Or is that more of I know it's strange kind of just asking you because it's obviously not just you, it's Austin, Alana, and Troy as well.
Yeah.
But just for you, is that something you guys want to keep going, or is it just kind of playing it by ear as times roll?
We chat about it. I think, well, it started, so the very first, I think like the first 2 or 3 episodes were still like monthly. Like we only went weekly after a little.
They were so good, but it's really, like, I gotta wait like 30 days for the next one. Oh God.
But the main reason for that is just the 4 of us are so busy, and we're not Greg Miller, clearly. But and also the amount of traveling that we're doing as well. That's the big one. Like, or the amount that like people's schedules are like, dictated by others. So like I'm probably the most flexible because I own my company. So if I want to go away for 2 hours, I can go away for 2 hours. But like, if you're Troy and you're like shooting something and you have to be on set, or if you're going and recording something or whatever, like someone like Troy, when the work comes in, Troy has to go and take the work, and similarly, like, Austin's making music and Alana now has, the full-time job. So there's real life starts to get in the way. Obviously during these times, like we've all had a bit more free time. So it's kind of fit in weekly. I could see it going back to monthly. I think we love doing it. We're mates. It's a nice excuse to just hang out like that. We don't cut much out of it like that, other than like the 10 minutes of us trying to get our microphones working at the start, and usually like at the end, like quarter of an hour of us all like talking about all the NDA stuff that we can't talk about on air. Like most of that show we broadcast, so you've almost weirdly seen like a time lapse of our friendship, which is a very weird thing to kind of have in public like that. But it's interesting, and I think we will. I definitely want to keep going with it, but I think it probably will lose the weekly thing just because, I'll need to. I like when we were working on John Wick, I was flying to LA once every couple of months, and I was going to different places in Europe. So I wouldn't be able to stick to like being around for recording every week, and definitely not Troy, and probably not Austin, and Alana is tricky because she's got the full-time job. So I think probably we'd go to monthly. That would be my expectation once things like loosen up. Because it's busy, but we will, because I tend to spend a lot of time in the States for probably we'll actually be able to do some like in-person stuff. That would be awesome to be able to record some episodes when we're all at the same event, or I'm in LA or whatever. We can kind of put that stuff together. So it should hopefully kind of come together. We'll see. But monthly, I think. Sorry, I've answered your question like 5 times in a row. I'm looping a little bit.
Perfect. Love it.
Out of all the stuff I have notes on and questions up and everything here, I completely forgot to add Play, Watch, Listen to that list. So I would just like real quick, Play, Watch, Listen, if you don't know, is a podcast between Alana Pierce, Troy Baker, Mike Bithell, and Austin Wintory. Do you guys ever have guests on there? I don't remember off the top of my head any episodes.
No, that was Alana's initial pitch to us, was like, we're never going to have a guest. That was her whole kind of sale for it, because we did it. The reason, the kind of genesis of it was me, Troy, and Austin worked on John Wick together, and we were doing a New York Comic Con panel on it, and I asked Alana to host it, and the 4 of us just got on so well, like in organizing that panel, and then we all went out for dinner after, and I think Alana just made a mental note that was like 4 people that was fun to have in a room together, and I think she saw something there that would be of interest, I guess, to her community or whatever, and put that together. But yeah, her thing is, I think basically we the only reason we do a guest if one of us was unavailable, maybe just have someone else kind of sub in. But I think that show works really nicely because of the 4 of us and our relationships and our kind of chemistry with each other. And I don't know if bringing someone else into that might kind of disrupt that. I'm not sure. We may at some point though. Ultimately, like, I very much
too much.
I really, well, Troy's still annoyed that Greg's becoming an actor. He's very irritated by that. Because Troy needs to be in everything. So obviously it's a frustration.
Except for this
but yeah,
show.
no, I think ultimately, like, I think of it. I definitely think of it as Alana's show, so I will go wherever she leads, to be honest, because I think she's done a really good job putting it together.
She has.
So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, and you can check that out on podcast services everywhere. It's a great show. I haven't caught every episode, but the stuff that I have watched and listened to has been really good. And it's so fun. I really love the idea of having something that's behind the scenes from so many different angles. You've got, yourself, who's a writer, designer, coder. So you've got a lot of insight behind the scenes. Then you've got Troy, who has the inside workings of voice audio. Then Austin has, the inside workings of like other game audio. And then Alana, who gets to see all of it from the outside and somewhat from the inside, especially now.
Well, she's now a writer at Santa Monica, yeah. So she's very much inside AAA game development right now, which can be interesting because obviously all of that stuff is much more carefully controlled. So she probably won't be able to speak too much about it for a while, but I think she's learning a lot there as well.
Yeah, she's usually very, very open about the things she learns and the things she knows. So yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see that kind of shift. And I think that's why probably she had to make a lot of changes in her life as far as, being on the X cast and things like that. It's going to be definitely really cool to see that evolve for her. It's super exciting.
Very much so.
Definitely. I had one more thing I was going to bring up, and I honestly, for the life of me, cannot remember it right now.
Oh no, I'm sorry.
No, it's not your
Another
fault.
Another trophy thing?
Actually, no. So I know it was brought up, I believe when was it brought up? I can't remember if it was on an episode of Play, Watch, Listen, or it must have been, because I'm pretty sure. Yeah. I remember I was watching or listening to this episode while doing the Division 2 raid, which was like a traumatic experience because it was super hard. But now that memory's ingrained of listening to that specific episode, it's just in that time. I remember you talking about, you guys were all kind of talking about like porting stuff, and I think it was brought up if the Solitaire Conspiracy was going to be brought to iOS or Android, but I don't remember if consoles were mentioned. Has that ever been kind of on the horizon of potentially bringing it to other platforms like Switch, PlayStation, Xbox, and stuff like that?
I mean, it's always something we're thinking about. We're always considering these things. Honestly, with Solitaire Conspiracy, because it was such a quick turnaround and to make the initial game. Now we're supporting it and making all this additional stuff for it, which is weird. But like, we spend more time doing post-release development on Solitaire Conspiracy now than we spent making it in the first place, which is wild. We definitely, like with that one, definitely wanted just to get it to PC, see if people were digging it, and then kind of go from there. People are digging it, so obviously we're kind of thinking in all those directions and trying to work out like what we want to do with it. I think it makes sense on console. I'd like to play it on console. I think it would fit.
I'd finally play it if it came to console.
Yeah, I think one of the
you're one of the players who's waiting for it on console.
So yeah, I'm very much like you with like I've got my PC and like I built it initially for playing games, but then I started working on games and stuff like that, and now it's become strictly work. When I sit here, I'm recording or I'm working on something. Every time I look at Steam or my Epic library, I'm like I don't want to touch any of these. I want to go.
I can relate. No, I'm exactly the same thing. It's like a muscle memory thing, right? The second the mouse is in my hand, I'm not chilling. Yeah, no, I'm completely with you on that. So, well, yeah, we'll see. I think, yeah, like I said, it's done well on PC. It's found an audience, and that's definitely something we've always said that if it did, we would be exploring those things. So we're going to keep exploring, and we'll see where it goes.
Awesome. If you do,
that's my little. Do you see the smoothness with which I pointed actually answering your question?
Yeah.
That was good, right? You enjoyed that, yeah.
That was good. I like that. If you need any trophy help, just call this guy.
About Solitaire Conspiracy, I instantly played it with a mouse and keyboard. I never even thought about trying to play it with a controller. Does it have controller support?
The PC version, no, doesn't. No, I think if we do console, we'd have to think about that. It's built though on PC. It is very much built around those mouse interactions. So I think even if we do down the road do console stuff, we wouldn't be able to necessarily pull that back. But to be honest, yeah, Solitaire on PC. I want to play that on a mouse. Like it's a mouse game as far as I'm concerned. Like I think it makes sense. I think it makes sense. But yeah, well, obviously, yeah, on other platforms we'd have to explore that.
That was what I was thinking. I was like, it plays so well with a mouse and keyboard. I was thinking, how would you actually redesign the controls to work with a gamepad? And that would probably be one of the largest hurdles in getting it over to consoles.
Yeah,
it often is, and just the quirks of console as well, like things like font size and stuff, where like there's a lot of really interesting challenges to doing console versions. We've definitely struggled in the past to work that out. And there's games like the circular games. The reason they're only on Switch is because I think it's a fun handheld game. I'm not sure I like the idea of the circulars on a TV. Although Shu disagrees with me. Shu says it would work on a TV. I don't know. I don't think it does. I don't think it would. But so specific sometimes with these ports that you think about that stuff. I think there's solvable problems with Solitaire. I think there's ways of doing that well. I mean, there's lots of good card games on console. So I think there's pointers of how to do that. Pointers, there you go, like a mouse pointer. You're right though. It's definitely it would definitely. If we go down that road, it would definitely be it would be harder on that level. And this is often the case with console ports. It's not necessarily the tech side of porting a game that's tricky. Getting the engine running, getting the shaders over, getting all the complex stuff working on the console. It's a big job, but like it's not necessarily always as tricky as, but how does it play on a console? And how do we make this feel like it's meant to be on a console? That's usually where you spend more of the time. I think people often think of porting as just a button you click or a technical process, but it's actually often a whole scale kind of redesign of how all your interactions work to make that work. And we've definitely done it better and worse in different cases. Like there's definitely times I think we've been more or less successful in that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's actually something I thought about when I started playing John Wick, was like, I feel like this would play a lot better if I was using a mouse, because I'm able to just kind of click instead of scrolling placement by placement.
Sure. I mean, a strategy game. I think strategy games in general, right? Like they feel very at home on a mouse and keyboard. I do like how we did it with John Wick. I think in terms of
extremely well,
how that 100%. Comes together, it works. But I hear what you're saying. Like definitely, like from a native point of view, like strategy does historically tend to feel. I'm trying to think of like. Are there any strategic games I can think of that are actually better on a control? Probably like Halo Wars, maybe just because it was designed from the ground up for that, but then you have to make a lot of concessions to kind of get there. But yeah, so it's a lot of it. It's actually a really interesting area of game design that I think isn't talked about as much. I think it's often kind of invisible to the player. Like they don't necessarily think about how those things are coming together.
Right. You just, oh, I got a game. I'm going to press this button. It's going to do this. And it's not as one-to-one as a lot of people think. But quick question, just out of curiosity.
Sure.
What do you guys use to make your games? Do you guys use an engine, or is everything kind of like raw
written
code?
determination? Oh God, no. We Unity across the board.
Cool.
So
I was just curious what you guys used for that, because I know there's like a lot of.
Yeah, I mean.
Go ahead.
So go on. No, please go for it. There's a lot of.
I would just say there's a lot of like, so many ways to do things, especially nowadays when we have all these different engines and stuff.
Unreal, Unity.
Kind of piggybacking off of that, do you guys primarily do coding, or are you more focused on like blueprint systems? I know Unity has a blueprint system. I'm not sure how in depth it is. I know with like Unreal, it is like 100%.
It's definitely not as evolved. Yeah, it's definitely not to the same like extent as. It's okay. My dinner arrived as we're talking, and this can all stay in the episode because it's cool. No, it's all good. So my girlfriend is removing curry from bags as quietly as possible. And bless her, she just knocked a massive bag over. It's fine. I don't think they heard. It's not going to be in the podcast. This is fine. This isn't part of the show.
We can't,
totally part of the show.
We can't hear basically anything unless it's coming from you. Just with your.
I hear you. She doesn't know that though, so she's being very quiet. It's fine. So it's cool. You're doing a great job, and I'm very excited for my curry. Thank you very much. We're predominantly code, so scripting. We C#. We write everything in. We have a variety of kind of approaches, but every single one of our teams always involves just a coder whose primary focus is that. So on Solitaire, I coded it. On John Wick, there were a few coders. So it's depending on the scale of the project. Obviously, there's bigger or smaller, and also based on the scale of the project. Like my attention, with John Wick, I didn't write a line of code. Subsurface Circuit, I didn't write a line of code because it was more important that I was writing the script. Whereas other coders could do that better than I could. So there's always that process of finding how we'll split the roles up. But yeah, we always set aside that time. We don't use designer focused tools like blueprints very often. Arguably we should. Arguably those things have really come along, especially on Unreal, as you say. Unity, I'm not quite trusting of it yet. Maybe in a few years.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's one thing that I'm glad exists, because I have no coding experience. That was something that, especially where I live, there was no, the extent of our coding classes you could take in school or something was like a computer class where 1/3 of the term or whatever, it's like, here's Photoshop, and the next term it's like, here's what was Adobe's website maker? Oh god,
Dreamweaver.
So it's like, we're gonna teach you how to use HTML, and it's like, cool. What am I gonna do with this? It's like, oh, here's how you make a red square, and that was the extent of the entire course, and then that was it.
Don't underestimate the businesses you can build by making a red square.
No.
You can do great things with that.
It's just the fact that they kind of did that, and then basically it was like, okay, we're moving on. Now we're back to photo editing or something. It's like, well, I want to learn more about coding.
I think that's often the thing with higher education. Definitely, that's been my experience interacting. And I think it's a good thing to an extent, because I think a lot of education is about giving you a sample of each of these things. You go to the buffet, you work out what thing you like, and then that's something you can kind of delve into. So I think it's good to get a breadth. I think that makes sense. And I'm sure there would be other students who would go, oh yeah, HTML is my jam. I'm gonna go and do that.
Yeah.
So I think it's absolutely valid. I love that you can make games. I know amazing developers who work predominantly in blueprints in Unreal, and it's astonishing what you can get done.
I use,
the
quality.
I don't know
shit about code.
Well, the good news, honestly, if you're using blueprints, you do know how to code. You just don't know the syntax of writing out text.
Sure.
It's functionally, when I'm writing code, I'm doing exactly the same thing. I'm just using a worse tool to create. That's all the difference between, at this point with blueprints in Unreal. That's the only difference between me and you, is I'm writing it into Notepad, and I can't. Every time I have to remember how something flows, I have to map it in my brain. You have a better interface for that. So you're doing the same job I'm doing. I don't like people who are snobbish about code over blueprints. It's the same thing. At the level that most game developers are using, it's neither of us are coding an engine. You and I are not real programmers in that sense. Like, we're not doing that work.
We're not actually making like the
complex
base work that like the people at Epic are doing, where it's like, we're gonna build all this stuff you can use. I'm just like, thank you, I'm going to repurpose it. Yeah.
Being snobbish within game development, like, ultimately, if you're a game developer who's making a game, your job is to get there as efficiently and quickly and professionally as you can and make the best game you can and treat the people around you as well as you can. The snobbishness between, well, I use Unity script, well, I use C#, I don't care. None of it matters. Make and ship a game, because generally the people who make and ship games are not arguing about what approach is better. And I think that's something that, as a community, we often kind of trip up over. I see a lot of that kind of stuff going back and forth, where it's like, just as you're doing, just make a game, just get on with it. Like, don't argue with strangers about this.
Yeah. That actually. Do we still have a couple minutes with you, or do you gotta bounce? Because we can.
I can smell mango chutney. Yeah, my friend. I need to. It's too delicious smell. The poppadoms are right there, and this is killing me. I'll be honest.
Okay. Do you have anything that you want to throw out there? Anything that you want to let the world know about before we let you go?
Yep. Well, if someone's listening to this who likes podcasts, which presumably they do, if they're listening to this, they should listen to Play, Watch, Listen, which we mentioned earlier. I think that's a really fun thing that I'm very flattered to be involved in. For our games, check out my Twitter at Mike Bithell, or check bithellgames.com. I think that's the name. Well, I don't know if that's the URL.
It is.
It might not be the URL.
You have it open right here.
Excellent. That's the URL then. Bithellgames.com. I didn't make that webpage, so I didn't remember that. And yeah, just check out our games. We're often in Steam sales, so check us out in the next Steam sale if you want playing weird indie games. That's it, really. That's all my stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. It's been a really fun chat.
Thank you for coming on. It was really nice of you to give us some of your Saturday to join a bunch of people for a video that might get 20 views. It's you will run through the Hitman level for like the 6th time. So this is great. It's a nice little break. So I appreciate that. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing this go.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, everyone that's going to check this out. And I hope you enjoy. Thank you so much and have a great day. All right. Bye.